Ok, so, buongiorno. Scusi, non parlo italiano. I speak English, so I try not to speak too fast, that you have the chance to get everything. If you have questions, we can do that afterwards. So as Angel said, I give you an overview with a few slides, and then I will show you the functionality in a small demo system, which I have on my Mac here. So let's get a little bit more insight into what we have. Well, quick overview about the portfolio. Parallels Desktop, Angel mentioned it already. My virtual machines are running with Parallels Desktop. And we have another product where we had the presentation yesterday, that's Parallels Remote Application Server, where you can publish applications or full desktops from a Microsoft Windows terminal server to nearly any device, including mobile phones, not only Apple, also Android. But the presentation today is about Parallels Mac Management. So what is it good for? What's the situation we see in many customer organizations? Many customer organizations come traditionally from the Windows side. So they have Windows PCs and they are managed with Microsoft System Center. And in some departments, mainly in the creative departments, they started to use Macs because Macs are predominant for creatively people. Management people want to have Macs because they look nice and fancy. And some companies have changed their mind and said, let the user decide if he wants a Windows PC or a Mac. But that brings challenges to the IT people. They know how to manage a Windows box. But what about the Macs? Different operating system. It's a Unix system. It's not Windows. And what about corporate compliance rules? So secure passwords, hard drive encryption, software deployment. And what kind of Macs do we have? How can we manage that? So the number of Macs is growing in organizations, and the need to manage the Macs somehow similar as the Windows boxes comes up. So you have actually three choices. Don't manage the Macs, not a good choice. Use a separate product, then you have a team that manages the Windows environment, and either another team or the same people with another product managing the Macs. How would it be if you have one tool to manage Windows and the Macs the same way? And that's what we did. We integrated the Mac management into Microsoft System Center, that you cannot manage the Macs the similar way as you manage the Windows devices. So single pane of glass. What kind of areas do we cover? So when we have to manage a device, first of all, we have to find the devices and put them into the inventory so that we know about the Macs. And when we have them in the inventory, we get all the information about what hardware is it, what processor, what LAN card is in it, what hard drive, especially if you need to increase or exchange the hard drive to get more data on it. Yeah, that's the inventory information. And then you want to actively manage these devices. For example, setting passwords or password policies, or changing Wi-Fi settings, use a corporate certificate to connect the Macs to the corporate Wi-Fi. Since all the information goes into System Center, you can run reports on it. So you can run reports on what kind of Macs do we have, so how old are they, what kind of software is installed on these Macs. For example, have the users installed tools like OneDrive or other sharing tools which are not corporate policy, so you can find out. And of course, you want to deploy software. So the company has made a license agreement, for example, with Microsoft to deploy Office for the Mac. So you can deploy this Office package for the Mac on all your corporate Mac computers and other tools as well. And you also want to manage the updates of the operating system. And this is all you can do with the Parallels Mac Management solution. That's just another view on that. So we have the underlying technology, like Windows Server for System Center, of course. Then the areas which we have just covered. And the idea is just have a single pane of glass where you can manage and view the Mac devices the same way as you can manage the Windows devices. Oops, that was too fast. So some of you who have experience with System Center know, yeah, System Center has some capabilities to manage the Macs already, so why do we need another product? And if we go to the comparison here, so in this table we have the core functionality which come natively with System Center and the functionality we have with Parallels Mac Management, you see a big difference. So that's the gray dots are the native functionality, and the red dots are what we add. I don't want to go through all the details. I want to mention one point, that's the last one here on the slide here. If you want to manage the Mac clients just with Microsoft System Center, you need to have PKI in place. You need to have certificates and an encrypted communication between the devices. Why is that? Because Microsoft System Center treats the Macs as mobile devices, so like a mobile phone. Running or implementing PKI is not an easy project. That takes a lot of planning. I don't know who of you has implemented PKI. That requires a lot of planning and steps on. We don't require that, so you can manage your Macs without PKI in place. If you have PKI in place, no problem, we support that as well. And even the change from non-PKI to PKI is possible. Actually, you have to deploy the certificates and then reconfigure the Parallels Mac Management tool to get access to the new environment. By the way, since I saw somebody taking the picture, that table is available on our webpage. So you can, if you go to the Parallels webpage, to Parallels Mac Management, you find that table on the data sheet. We work together with Microsoft and with Apple, and we got an endorsement from a senior director in product marketing, of course. It simply says, if you want to manage your Macs with Microsoft System Center, go and talk to Parallels. And this is why you're here today, to hear a little bit more about our solution. So let's get a little bit more technical how the architecture works. So this is just a sample configuration. It may look completely different in your organization. Smaller organizations have all the System Center components just on one server. Larger organizations have even more than these server here. So let's focus on the upper blue part for a moment. It shows how the Parallels components add into the System Center roles which are already existent in the environments. Our core component is the Parallels proxy. That's a Windows service which is installed on one of the System Center servers, typically on the one that runs the SMS provider. And that Parallels proxy service communicates to the SMS provider and to the Mac clients on the other end. We have our own Mac clients, so you don't require to install the Microsoft Mac Management client. So our client is fully integrated and has all the functionality we need. That's the other part of the system here. We have an extension to the admin console, which we will see in my small demo a little bit later. So it's fully integrated. It's no separate console to manage the Macs. Some of you who are using the Macs may know that the Mac does not understand Pixie Boot. If you want to deploy an image of the operating system or reinstall the Mac, you need to have or provide a netboot server. So on top of the distribution point with the Pixie row installed, we add the Parallels netboot server. So now if you press the N key while the Mac boots up, the Mac looks for a netboot server on the network and finds that server, and now it knows where it can get the images from. So you can deploy images to the Mac as well. If you want to deploy patches, we support that as well. We rely on the WSUS service, which is also part of the System Center. If you have more than one System Center site that's scaling out to remote offices, we support that as well. So that's the lower green part. We can install the additional rows in the secondary side as well. So what's the magic behind it? What's the idea behind it? Over the WAN connection, you don't want to deploy the same software package or the same image again and again and again. You just copy the big binary files to a distribution point in the remote site and then deploy it from there. So this saves bandwidth, WAN bandwidth between the main site and the secondary site, just to optimize the network usage. Meanwhile, the product is in version 5. We will shortly releasing a new version as well. So a few things on the current version. Some of you may use the Mac, have heard about DEP, Device Enrollment Program. Who of you is using a Mac and has heard about that? All Windows administrator, Windows users, mainly? Okay. So DEP is something specific to the Mac. The idea behind that is a zero-touch installation. So a new Mac gets, it needs to be DEP enabled, so you have to order it DEP enabled either from Apple or from a distributor which supports that program. And the Mac can be shipped directly to the end user. So the user unboxes the Mac, connects it to a network, and then this Mac goes to the internet, talks to the Apple server and says, oh, I know the serial number, and this Mac is managed by your company organization environment. So it gets all the information or all the configuration items you have configured in System Center gets deployed on that Mac. So it doesn't have to go to the IT department to do the installation stuff. It can be directly done by the user. That's the concept of DEP. Usually, if you don't have System Center and Parallels Mac management, the Apple administrator creates the configuration profile or the device profile on an Apple MDM environment. With Parallels Mac management, you can do that in System Center, so it points back to your environment to deploy the necessary installation and software for that particular Mac. A couple of admin tools which have been improved and added. For example, you can run a script, a terminal script or a Python script directly from System Center and run it on the particular Mac computer or on a group of Macs. So you don't have to walk to that particular user and run the script. You can do it directly from System Center. Makes it a lot easier. And of course, while there's still System Center current branch 16.0.10, we also support 17.0.2, which is the latest at the moment, and of course the latest builds of the Mac operating system as well. Yeah, I talked a little bit about the DEP. That's just a screenshot. And yeah, you would have the enrollment profiles. That's the configuration, how the Mac has to be set up for a particular user or the group of users. It's actually a zero touch, so it doesn't have to go to the IT department to get the information. Okay, let's have a look. And I hope it works now. I can back to the foreground. Okay. So let's go to administration. Use the mouse on the other side. So how can we bring a Mac into System Center? And then during the architecture slide, I mentioned that we integrate into the console. And here you see the Parallels logo, and we have the ways to discover the Macs here built into the admin console in System Center. So we have a couple of ways to enroll a new Mac into System Center. Method number one is a manual method. Actually, you go to a Mac, log on, use the URL we will see in a minute, use Safari, go to that URL, that downloads the Mac management agent we have seen on the Mac already, the architecture slide, install it, run the configuration, and now the Mac is part of the System Center inventory. The manual method is just good for doing it for one or two of the Macs, or the Mac has to be treated in a very special way. What we want to do is to find the Macs automatically and enroll them into System Center. So we have two automated ways to do that. So the traditional way to do that is to run a network scan. Go to the properties here. So depending on the Nmap timing policy, the more aggressive we go on the network, the quicker we'll find them. But that produces quite a bit of network load because we have to ping each email address, each IP address to find the Mac on the network. So which network segments do we use? That's configured in boundaries. And of course, you have already configured the boundaries because it's where you find the Windows devices as well. In all the organization I have spoken to, the Macs are on the same network segments as the Windows clients, which is traditionally in the office rooms. They connect to the network or either use the Wi-Fi network to connect to the corporate network. So here you enable the boundaries, and then you can use them and find the Macs. Of course, we can filter on subnets here as well. An important point which I need to mention is you have to sign up the Macs. To install the agent and run the agent, we need to have an administrator account on the Mac computer. So here we can configure these accounts or add these accounts to the list. So what do we do? First of all, on the Mac, you have to enable the remote login. Otherwise, there's no way to connect to the Mac through the network. So that's a setting on the Mac which has to be done prior to do the network scan. So if our login is enabled, we can detect the Macs and we can log on to the Macs if we know the credentials. And here you provide the credentials to log on to the Macs. So we have an account here. We try to log on. If we were able to be an administrator on the Mac, we can configure the agent and the job is done. If that first account does not match the requirements, we try account number 2, which is in the list, account number 3, and so on. If we run out of accounts, then we have to do the manual method we have just talked about before. Regarding accounts we can use, there can be either a local account on the Mac. Some organizations have added their Macs to Active Directory, so the Mac has a computer account in Active Directory. We can use these accounts as well to log on as an administrator. If an account has been defined as an administrator, we could use that account as well to sign the Mac up for System Center. That's, by the way, the third method to sign up a Mac. So if the Mac's already part of Active Directory, we don't have to do a network scan anymore because that Mac is already known to the infrastructure. So Parallels Mac management, there's not much we can see because it simply has to be configured the first time. And then we query Active Directory and say Active Directory gives a list of all your known Macs, either in the whole Active Directory or just in a certain OU. And then we get the list back, so we know the host name. Through DNS, we know the IP address, and then we can go directly to that Mac, log on to the Mac, and configure the agent. So we have 3 methods now: the manual method, network scan, Active Directory. If you use the device enrollment program, of course, the whole process to sign up the Mac for System Center works in the background as well. So that's actually the 4th method. That's a little bit outside of the scope because that requires the Apple DEP enrollment for the particular Mac as well. So we're quite flexible in finding the Macs or sending them up into System Center. So let's see if we have a Mac in this environment. So I open Device Collection. Move that a little bit down here. Come on. Okay. We have a device collection which is called All Mac OS X Systems. That device collection is created during the installation of the Parallels Mac management component. And here we have a Mac. So I have a demo Mac environment. So what kind of Mac is this? What information do I get about the Mac? And even if you know anything about Parallels Mac management, what you would do for a Windows box, do a right click, go to Start, Resource Explorer, and here we get the list. It's exactly the same for the Mac. The idea of Parallels Mac management is to use the same methodology, the same interface as much as we can. Only where the Mac is very different from what we can do with Windows, we have to go a little bit different route, which we will see in the next step. So let's have a quick look on that particular Mac. So we get the information about the processor. So we have the inventory information, what hard drive is used. So in my case, it's an Apple SSD. I can look at the drive partitions here. I also can have a look on which users have a profile on that Mac. So in my case, 2 users have a profile on that Mac. And let's have a look at what software applications it's installed. So I see Safari here, and I move that box a little bit further here. I got the scroll bar. So I got all the additional information, including the version number. And I can run reports on all this information. So I can run reports on what software is installed on my corporate Macs. So everything is there. Now let's start managing these Macs. So we go to Compliance Settings, Configuration Items, and there the Mac is different. The Mac does not understand group policies or GPOs. So Apple has created a different concept to manage these Macs. So how does that work? Actually, it's not really very complicated. I have a small example here, but I can create a new one. These configuration objects which get applied to the Mac are so-called configuration profiles. And within the configuration profile, we have different items which are called payloads. And I just want to start the editor. That's part of the Parallels Mac management product. I can configure certain items. For example, password policy for the Mac clients. So my password should be, bless you, 8 characters. we need to have 2 special characters like digits and characters like an asterisk or some other characters. And that password should be good, let's say 180 days. So now the users on the Mac are enforced to use secure passwords and not just 1, 2, 3, 4 as the passwords, because they're corporate Macs. They have valuable information that need to be protected properly according to corporate standards. So having a secure password with a certain complexity is rule number 1 to make the Macs more secure. So how does this get applied to the Mac? Next step is to create a configuration baseline. And within the configuration baseline, I just use the other one here. You add 1 or more of these configuration profiles we have just seen. And these these baselines then get applied to a group of Macs. So I select Browse here, use a device collection. In my case, I have just the one here. Of course, you can create individual device collection for different purposes. So for the group of Macs which have to be managed in the same way, you create your own device collection, same as for Windows. That's pretty easy. Actually, behind there is a SQL query to identify the devices which belong to a particular device collection, and you can select that create a device collection here. So we were able to set configuration items on the Mac. I quickly go back to the items here to show you a couple of other items which you can configure. We have seen the password. You can exchange. The Mac doesn't have an exchange server, but the Mac operating system has a mail client, and here you can pre-configure the mail client of the Mac operating system on the client to connect to an exchange server, either on-premise or in the cloud. So that makes it a lot easier. The users are not IT experts. They don't know how to configure that mail client, so you can create a rule how to connect the Mac to the exchange server within the organization. Same for contacts, that's the address book on the Mac, and for the calendar as well. A big topic is network configuration, and depending on especially on the Wi-Fi configuration, what security type you have. So let's have a look at WPA2 Enterprise. Depending on the encryption type, let's say if you use LEAP, you can provide username and password. If you use TLS, you can provide the certificates. That makes it a lot easier to configure a Mac within your corporate organization to connect it to the network. And that removes a lot of work from the IT department to configure each Mac individually and get them onto the corporate network. Let's have a look at, I missed one thing because it was on the agenda. That's the hard drive encryption on the Mac. The Mac operating system has a hard drive encryption which is called Firewall 2. That's comparable to BitLocker on the Windows side. And here you can configure an item which enforces to encrypt the hard drive on the Mac computer. So you can use either personal or institutional key. Personal key, the Mac gets encrypted individually. Institutional keys, you provide a public key which is used for the encryption. And then it's used for the encryption of the Macs within the organization. What's the magic behind that? If the Mac gets encrypted, you need to have a recovery key. So if the user forgets his password, you need to have that recovery key to decrypt the information and to re-encrypt the information again, because the user's password is used to encrypt and decrypt the data of the Mac. If the user has forgotten his password, so there's no way to access the information anymore for that particular user. So how do I get access to that? And if I have to reset the user's password, that's pretty simple. If I go to my Macs again, I do a right click and go to Properties. So we have added a tab which is called Firewall 2. And if my Mac had been encrypted with hard drive encryption, I would see the recovery keys here in my view. My hard drive is not encrypted, so this is why the fields are empty here. So now I can reset the user's password, can decrypt information and re-encrypt them with a new password. Therefore, you need to have the recovery key. That's just part of the process. Let's have a look at software. Let's have a look at Apple software updates for the operating system. We pull the list, actually the catalog, from the Apple server in the US and provide you the list of available updates which you can be deployed to the Mac computers. So this is just the list of items you can deploy to the Macs. Now you can pick one or more of these, for example, create a software update group and put a couple of these items into a software update group. And the same as we have seen before with the configuration profiles, you can deploy the software update group to either all your Macs or to just a particular group of Macs. So that enables you to keep your Mac clients on the current state of the operating system and remove the manual action for the user. A user will say, I always install the latest patches. Another will say, no, it's not a good time for me. I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow he's forgotten about it. Next week he still doesn't do it. And someone here has completely forgotten about doing any updates on that. So here we can enforce the updates of software on the Mac computer to keep the Macs on the current state as you want to have it as a corporate standard. What about third-party software? We support two methods to update or to deploy software on the computers. So method number one is the packages method. So for example, Chrome, I want to deploy Chrome as a browser to all my Macs. So I create a package and deploy Chrome to all my Mac users. The application is a little bit different. It gives you an additional option. You can make a package optional instead of mandatory with the packages. When you make a package or an application optional, the user can decide whether he wants to install it or not. So how is that done? So I hope I can perhaps come on to my other screen. I don't want to do that installation at the moment. So part of the Mac management client is the Parallels application portal. And here I see the packages which are optional, or actually the applications which are optional. And now the user can decide which one of them he wants to install. If he clicks on install, the software gets installed on that particular Mac. The user does not have to be an administrator anymore because the software is installed by our agent. So that it removes the need for a user to be administrator on the Mac just for the purpose of installing software. If a user is administrator, he can reconfigure things, he can do sometimes stupid things which he doesn't know what he's doing, which causes some headaches with the IT department. So with this solution, there is no need for a user to be an administrator anymore on the Mac client. Just if you provide a software package or an application, it gets installed on the Mac without the user being administrator on his Mac client anymore. So, while we are on the Mac client, let's have a quick look how the Parallels Mac management client behaves on the Mac. So we get some additional information. If I open it up in the system here, I see which the client connects to the systems and actually to the proxy service. I see when the last time the connection has been done and when the last time policies have been received. So I got all the information on the client side here as well. The Mac client works pretty much the same way as the Windows client. So the communication is initiated by the client. It talks to the proxy service in this case, so it talks to System Center and asks, is there anything new for me to do? So the information of the updates is not directly pushed from System Center, so the client connects and asks for updates on either policy or software. So same concept as we have for the Windows side. So let's go back to the console again. So we have the two applications, Firefox and Text Wrangler, we have seen on the client side here before. The last thing I want to show you is deploying images to the Mac. So we go to Operating System. To deploy a corporate image to the Mac, we need to provide two images. image number 1 is the boot image. That's a mini image which is initially loaded over the network and stored into the RAM of the Mac. This is where the Mac boots from if you press the N key, and we have found the netboot server. Then we want to actually copy the full corporate branded image to the Mac. So that's the restore image. That's the image you have customized on the Mac computer according to your corporate requirements. Added a couple of additional software which is mandatory, for example, for all the users within the organization. You may have removed certain items which are not used within the organization. For example, you may not want to use the mail program which comes with the Apple operating system because you're deploying another package, another software like Microsoft Office, which contains Outlook on the Mac. So there's no need to use the built-in program. Could be removed. That can be deployed to the Macs. So how is the installation process controlled? This is done by task sequence. We're going to have a quick look at the task sequence editor. So I have a small example. So that's actually a kind of batch procedure how the Mac is going to be installed. First step is to copy my corporate image, so my restore image onto the Mac. My next step is to set the host name. So in my case, I get prompted for the host name on the console, but you also can run a script. For example, determine the host name from the hardware ID of that particular Mac computer, or just from the MAC address of the network interface, depending on what you want to do. I can install additional software packages, for example, Chrome. I also can sign up the Mac for Active Directory. So I need to provide the information, domain, organization unit, and of course an account in Active Directory, which enables to sign up a computer into Active Directory. So it gives a couple of options here. You also can control the flow of that task sequence. So you can decide what you want to do if you have an error, or you can add if statements. That means you can make certain steps dependent on other steps or results of other steps you have done before. One of my customers has built a task sequence, and depending if the Mac is a MacBook, so a mobile computer, or it's a stationary Mac, so on the desktop, so an iMac or a Mac Mini, he decides if it's a MacBook, they have to use the Wi-Fi. If it's a stationary Mac, so an iMac, the Wi-Fi gets disabled and they have to use the WAN cable to connect to that Mac. So, and that's just done by running the task sequence when they deploy the operating system to the Mac computer. So we're quite flexible in doing these kind of things here. So let's have a quick look on some tools which make life easier for an administrator. So on the properties of a particular Mac or on a device collection, actually we can either VNC or SSH directly to that Mac from System Center. That makes it easier to manage the Mac if you want to assist a user, or if you want to find out if a certain package or if a script has done the results you expected. You can directly log on to that Mac and see the results. Inventory update. You may know that System Center checks or asks for inventory updates just once every 7 days. That's the default setting. Of course, you can change that setting, but sometimes you don't want to change, or most of the time you don't want to change that setting. But for a particular Mac or for a group of Macs, you need the inventory information immediately. So you can go to that point here and request an inventory update for that Mac or for that group of Mac. You don't have to wait until the next interval kicks in. So you have the current information, what kind of software and hardware is running on that particular Mac. You also can run scripts, what I mentioned. So we have a script editor here where you can type your terminal commands or your Python script or run it from a file. So you have direct access to this kind of information and provide that or deploy that to an individual Mac or to a group of Macs if you want to change certain settings.